how do you put a child to bed, especially if they're age 3 through 8, especially after a full day of stimulating experiences? How do you do that? When they're babies, we know how to do it. There's literature about it, there's so much advice about it. And then they get to be toddlers and preschoolers and 3 and 4 and 5, and it just doesn't work anymore. You cannot shush them in your arms. And so I have a guest today on Homeschool Ways who will teach us how to put our children to bed. Welcome to the show, Karen Brough, author of The Coast is Clear.
Thank you so much, Adriana, for inviting me. That's a big call. I'll hope to give some skills. That's my goal for today.
So, this is a picture book, and it's a gentle story that offers reassurance, connection, and calm at the end
Mhm.
of a very full day. We know that we should be reading to our kids throughout the day. We know that it's nice to have a bedtime story. The children love that. But let's discuss um, multi-sensory approaches to this, because this is what this book is all about. You're not just reading to them, you're not just giving them pictures to look at. And while they listen to your soothing voice, there's something else going on. So, Karen?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I guess starting with how this book came about is maybe a good way to introduce this.
Yeah,
I'm a
let's
former
begin there.
elementary teacher. I'm a faith girl. I love the senses, the five senses, and I think we only just scrape the surface of what we can experience through each of them. So how this story came about, I was laying in bed, hubby and I were laying there. All of a sudden, a complete racket. I'm an Aussie, so a racket happened outside. The dog was barking. You know, just everything unleashed, and we just did not know what was going on. And I was exhausted. Truth be told, confession time, I kept my eyes closed. I thought that's a hubby problem. I'll let him
Good
deal
for
with the
you.
noise outside. We've all been there. Um, and so he went outside, and I just kept my eyes closed. And it was almost as if my hearing sense dialed up. And I heard the different steps, you know, the door opening, his feet on the gravel outside, the sounds outside settling, and I started to envision what's actually happening out there. Your imagination kicked in.
Mhm.
And then as he came back inside, everything that had happened one way happened the other way, but in mirror. And so the other special thing about this book is it's actually a mirror poem. And so the same story forward and the same story back. And it's in that pattern, that rhythmic, poetic kind of rhythm that actually helps calm. Very few words in the book. That's been done intentionally. I've had a, a what is it? A soundscape engineered, so children and parents can actually listen to the story forward and then backward just through sound, just as I experienced on that night. Um, and that, it does something. The first time I played it to my hubby, he actually went to sleep.
Oh,
So,
wow.
you know, and for some kids, if the reviews are to be believed, it works. Like it helps just recenter and calm that nighttime space, which is often a very, winding up sort of space. So a
Mhm.
lot of books don't do that, you know. Anyway, I'm sure we'll get onto that. But that's how the story came about. And yes, I am all for senses.
Very interesting. It's always that personal experience, that moment that sparks ideas for content, for creation, even if
Yes.
it becomes something other than exactly what we went through, the personal experience is there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about bedtime stories in general. Like, why are they so powerful?
Mm. Um, I think I'm going to have to put my mum hat on here because my personal routine at night, I guess, was to, the kids go to bed, have their shower, like go to bed. We'd do prayers, story, catch up about the day. Um, and that time is a time that it's a pure time. It's a pure time of connection. It's
Mm-hmm.
that moment in the day where you and your child get to connect on a very real level, real level. It's often when, all the problems come out, all the news about the day, all the worries, all the concerns, all the great things, all the happy things. Like it's just a moment where you're giving yourself permission to really connect with your child, and your child gets your full attention, hopefully, in an ideal world. Doesn't always
Right,
happen, but especially with the
right.
more kids you have. But I think that's what sets it apart.
So you've written several books, and The Coast is Clear is just one of them.
Sure.
Beyond being a sweet story, what reassurance or emotional message does it offer children?
Cool. Look, health is a really important aspect of my life, and it's something that I've tried to help my children develop using God's peace as a guide. Like I am a Christian, so God's peace. I hope that's okay to use that kind of language here, but
Absolutely.
that's the reality. And so my intent with this book, one of the primary intentions was to impart God's peace, impart peace to those who don't necessarily even know him. Um, Although it's not a faith-based book, it's absolutely fine for secular audiences. My
Hmm.
goal was to impart peace. I think it's a really untapped resource, an untapped um, r- help in today's society. With all the mess, all the chaos, all the news. I think knowing how to just be one with God, rest, take that moment to breathe and be still. For me, that's the time I hear God best. And so my hope is that that's inviting him into this space. It's inviting a peace that surpasses all understanding. Um, yeah, so that's my hope with it. That
Yes,
was
and
my intent.
that is a very important emotional need that children have hope and faith and trusting in something
Yeah,
outside of themselves, even beyond mom and dad. You know, that there's
absolutely.
something out there that has created us and
Mm,
is protecting us.
mm, mm.
Um, we're gonna get back into the show here, but I would like to discuss with my audience just very briefly organization. It is hard to be a homeschool parent. It is hard to be a parent. And so you need to be organized. You are the one running the show, you are the one running the schedule or the routine. And so I have put together a few resources on my blog where you can go and download some PDF schedules for the day, for the week. Also, there's an organization that you can run yourself through. It's a PDF file that will help you to get things done in about 1 hour. If you don't even know where your records are or where your curriculum is, where your school supplies are, all that needs to be sorted out. And this PDF will help you do that in about an hour, which is not too shabby. So I invite you to go to homeschoolways.com/organized with a D at the end. Homeschoolways.com/organized. Now let's get back into the show with Karen Brough. The Coast is Clear is the title of the book. How can parents use stories to ease anxiety at night? And before you answer that, I just want to share sometimes it's simple things like maybe one of the bedrooms is farther than the rest of them. Every house is different.
Mm,
In my
mm.
house, we have two bedrooms fairly close together, and then there's like this large den and then another bedroom. So one of my children felt a little separated from us.
Sure,
And we
sure.
had a book, and I wish I had your book back then. But we had a book that talked about being connected with this red thread, that our hearts
Yes.
are connected. And so how would your book help with the struggle of fearing of being disconnected from the family?
Mm. Look, that's a really good point, and it's something that I think, I mean, we've got three children. I would say our youngest probably struggled with that most. We, like you, have parents at one end and then the kids are down the hallway, at the other end of the house.
Hmm.
We haven't always had that, but he really struggled with that. He was someone that, I mean, anxiety is borrowing tomorrow's worry and bringing it into today.
Hmm.
Okay. And we know that a huge percentage of that worry never actually eventuates.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think for me personally, when I have those anxious moments, and for my children as well, like we're really forward thinking. We're looking at those things in the future that aren't actually in the now. And that's where having a story, having a bedtime book, whether it be The Coast is Clear or whatever you find works, or even just some gentle music for our youngest that worked a treat. He loved listening to just some music, just some, sometimes it was stories. He actually, as he got older, he started listening to Hall and Oates, which, you know, that was his thing. But I think just music helped connect him in the space and gave him a distraction for that moment. Um, yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question, but I do think it's a way of helping them feel safe.
Yes.
You want books that can actually help them feel, um, not to use a new agey kind of term, but that mindful kind of space of being present,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and being in the now, being in their current environment. For me as a Christian parent, like we would pray over the room, we'd put on the armor. These were things that really helped just practically.
Hmm.
My youngest sort of settle. We did a lot of, what does that look like? Where is Jesus in the room? Anything to help him feel safe and present in that moment, and creating an atmosphere in his room that really was conducive to that, I think is really important too. If you've got all the toys and all the books and lots of stimulation in the room, that can be really difficult for some kids. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a life skill too. There are times where your child will not have you around. That's
Hmm.
the reality, so taking the time, reassuring, allowing them to feel safe and secure. you know, we're just up here. We are, like, you're going to be okay. Telling ourselves those truths is actually it's a life skill. We use that in adulthood, looking around, seeing that how things are. Hey, I am going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not alone. Yeah.
And so when you wrote, did you intentionally craft the word choice in
Mm.
this book? I thought it was rather intentional. I'm a word girl. I
Yeah,
notice
me
words and I'm
too.
thinking, why did you say this and not that? There are so many synonyms in the
Yes.
English language.
Yes.
So how does word choice affect a child's nervous system? And did you intentionally use rhythm and language to soothe children?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I
Mm.
absolutely did. And me too. I'm a words girl. I love words. And it's funny, some of the words that I often use are very, and you don't realize because I am an Australian, you don't realize that you're using it, but natural language here, but are unique for the US. And I actually want to show you a page to demonstrate this, what you're talking about. So
Okay.
this is effectively the center page,
Okay.
okay? And the words are listen and silence.
Hmm.
Now, when we read this book, the goal is to slow your voice down. Don't rush. Okay, it's meant to be kind of lived in as a book.
Hmm.
Let your child linger in it. You know, it's okay not to rush. So part of the ideal way to read this story, and I'm not telling you how to read it, but the words are meant to be lived in and experienced. You know, when you see listen, silence, just saying that, like I feel peace all over me.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's and yeah,
Words carry meaning, and I think just saying sometimes relax throughout the day. I have a mentor who worked as a pastor and a chaplain all his life, and he would just look at me and he would say, relax. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, if I said it myself to myself, I would relax. Just saying, listen. The child all of a sudden focuses on sounds. It's no longer, oh, the shadows, the monster under the bed. Sounds, and then silence. And it's okay to have a bit of silence, you know. But
In
yeah,
fact,
I
it's
love the idea of
important.
slowing
Mm,
down. We all have to slow down when we read these
mhm.
books to our kids.
That's right. Yes,
And for homeschool parents, this story will probably also spark conversations about creative writing, imagination,
for sure.
safety, emotions, for all families. But I'm thinking when we homeschool, every moment we have, we tend to make it into something educational. And
Yes,
if the child is older, so let's say the age for the book was 3 through 8, let's say the child is already a very young 9 that happens to still like the book and you want to read the book to him, to her, um, that can actually become a writing lesson afterwards. Like the next day, like, hey, do you remember in the book? This is what happened, and then you can build things from there, for especially
for
for parents
sure.
who like to create their own curriculum.
Right. Uh,
Um,
That's a
Go
dream
ahead.
of mine, Adria. That is an absolute dream of mine. I mean,
Okay.
in my classroom, I would love people to use it to extend it. I would love that. That's
Yeah.
actually part of the intention of the soundscape that goes with the book. You know,
Uh-huh.
you've got sound bingo, you've got creating your own soundscape. Like I can see that working really well in a homeschool environment, not so much in the classroom, that particular one, but creating a story, the mirror poem structure, you know,
Hmm.
having a story that goes forward and then back,
Yeah.
deciding how you can extend it for older children. You've got, and even younger children role playing the different characters. You know, they're having to be still body wise, this kinesthetic kind of learning style. You know, you can
Hmm.
really expand it really well. Like even for the older children, like deciding upon what do you want your reader's experience to be. This is much like what I had to do with my own book. You know, okay, well, my goal is to impart peace, to slow down the busyness of the day. You know, you've got prediction, for the younger children. You've got like so many different educational benefits and possibilities to go in that space. But yeah, a lot of creativity, a lot of rich educational activities that you could link in with this text for sure. And I actually do
Hmm.
that with all my books. I actually have a number of workbooks on the way for homeschooling space, just to extend the narrative, like to allow it to be applied educationally, because that's something I absolutely still value, even though I'm no longer teaching in that form. But yeah, for sure.
And so, what would you say, Karen, to the parent who feels rushed at bedtime? Because sometimes we just want to put the kid to bed so I can, do the dishes and answer the
Yes.
emails and do all this other stuff. What would you
Yeah.
say to a parent who feels rushed at bedtime?
Oh, for sure. Look, one of my biggest frustrations as a mum doing the three kids at night, like by the time you did, bedtime story, catch up about the day, prayers, like I wasn't getting to bed before, 10:30 some nights. Like by the
Hmm.
time I got out of their bedrooms, 9:30, and you want to be present. But a lot of the bedtime stories I found were really long.
Hmm.
And sometimes they'd pick up a book and you'd be like, please don't choose that one in my brain. Please don't. I can't read it again. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Once you get to the early readers and chapter books, they'd leave the kids on the cliffhanger, on the hook. And
Yes.
you just like, and then their brain's like, well, that's sparked.
Right.
Now I'm thinking, now I'm not ready for sleep. The beauty of this book it's a very, very short book and it can be as long as you take it. But if you did it as I intended it, it should take about maybe 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes to read.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then if your kid's still not fully settled, you pop on the soundscape so that they can just oh, and I got he's an incredible sound engineer actually to put some bedtime music, calming bedtime music at the end of it. So it really is part of the goal was to shorten bedtime but still keep the richness.
Okay. So let's explain to the readers what we mean by you pop on the soundscape the way you said it. So just tell them
Okay.
exactly what that would mean for the parent.
Okay. So with the book, I had a sound engineer create a soundscape, which is the story through sound. And so it takes the story through the steps, hubby getting out of bed, the clock chiming, the door opening, the door scraping, the dog stops barking and then it goes backwards, like as
Hmm.
in, the dog, goes to bed and then the door scrapes and then the clock chimes and then the snore sounds. Um, and so after that, there'll be a little bit of music, like bedtime music. So
Yeah.
effectively, that's all done through sound. So no words, just sound.
Okay. And is there a
Yeah.
QR code? How do they access the actual audio file?
Yeah, it's in the book. It's in the
Yeah.
back of the book. There's a QR code. It goes to a file, and they'd be able to connect with that.
Okay. Very good. So,
Hmm.
Karen, tell the audience how they can connect with you and
Cool.
where they can find the book besides
Yeah,
Amazon.
for sure. Well, the book's on Amazon, of course, but you can get it off my website, karenbrough.com. Anywhere good books are sold, basically.
Okay.
So bookstores and things can order it in. You can find out more about my books and I through karenbrough.com, which is Karen, KarenBrough.com, or my publishing company, hearthopepublishing.com. Mm,
Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show, Karen. I loved your book and I thought my audience would love it too. And I wish you good
you.
luck and thank you for thinking of the homeschool market producing curriculum for us.
Well, bless you. It's been a pleasure. Lovely meeting you.